Income inequality has never been a stranger to people. Throughout human history, strict class structures have limited income to families. Although kings and queens don't dictate the world's economy anymore, income inequality has persevered. More recently, in American history, society has been struggling to find the balance between total income equality, communism or socialism, and the disparities of the medieval times. In the economic boom that followed World War II, America saw incomes increase across the board, for the lower and upper classes alike. From the 1940s to the late 1960s, real hourly wages adjusted for inflation, and productivity positively correlated and increased. However, beginning in the early 1970s, they began to diverge. The 1970s are generally marked as the beginning of drastic income inequality. International political events, including an oil crisis in the Middle East and changing domestic micro and macroeconomic policies, caused a widening gap between the country's top and bottom earners. A new study released by economist Robert Wade spanned from 1947 to 2007. He breaks the population into 10 deciles, each representing 10% of the population based on income inequality. His study showed that until 1960, all deciles remained constant, and until 1980, the middle 50% remained fairly constant as well, holding about 50% of the national income. However, from 1980 onward, the top 10%'s share of the GDP has not stopped growing. Alongside growing income inequality, government tax policies have become more lenient to the top income bracket, and corporate taxes have decreased. The top income tax bracket has fallen from nearly 80% to 35%. Since 1988, the corporate share of national GDP has more than doubled, from 2% to 4.9%. In 2016, the average CEO pay across all publicly traded companies was $13.8 million, while the average worker made only $77,800. The average CEO made 204 times more than the average worker. In 1965, the ratio was 2 to 1. For comparison, currently in Germany, the ratio is only 147 to 1, compared to the US's 204. Between 1978 and 2004, the wage of the average worker increased 11%, while that of the CEO increased 997%. It is difficult to quantify the dollar amount of the disparity between CEO and worker earnings because in addition to paychecks, CEOs benefit from many job-related perks. These include but are not limited to stock options, company benefits, cash bonuses, and stock awards. So what exactly is the problem here? Well, as the rich get richer and everyone else gets poorer, there is less money flowing back into the economy. Money stays with the CEOs of large firms and households have less money to spend. The money that the CEOs are making isn't always returned to product markets. More often than not, the money enters foreign markets, capital markets, or stock options. So how do we fix that? The first step would be to minimize the wage gaps between the middle and upper classes. 2 companies have tried to implement this. Let's take a look at how that worked for them.
One Seattle-based credit card processing company, Gravity Payments, took a bold step in the field of income equality back in 2011. One day, the company's CEO, 31-year-old Dan Price, was confronted by an angry employee, Jason Haley, who claimed he was being ripped off. Haley expressed discontent with his $35,000 yearly salary and accused Price of having poor intentions, being selfish, and being unfair with the distribution of money amongst the employees. After the confrontation, Price was left reflecting on the truth of what Haley had proclaimed. Price felt guilty and expressed, "I was so scarred by the recession that I was proactively and proudly hurting my staff." From then on, Price vowed to fight against income inequality. Over the next 3 years, Price would hand out 20% annual raises, leading up to a minimum wage of $70,000 at the end of the 3 years. In order to pay for the pay increases, Price would reduce his own salary from $1.1 million to the same $70,000 that all his employees would be receiving. The public's reaction to Price's plan was immense. Prospective employees were lining up at the doors of Gravity Payments. Price noticed that the influx of enthusiastic prospective workers gave the company a better pool of employees who were more driven to work hard because of the salary incentive and thus were more productive for the company. While the employees were clearly satisfied with the generous pay, evidenced by only 2 employees quitting over the whole 3-year period, profits also rose. After the 20% wage increase in 2012, profits increased by 30 to 40%. After the same 20% wage increase in 2013, profits increased by the same amount. After the third year of wage increases, profits rose by slightly less due to diminishing returns as more workers were hired, but nevertheless, they were still much higher than 3 years back. On top of increased profits, customer retention was at an average of 91% over the 3 years, which is substantially higher than the industry average of 68%, and the customer retention even peaked at 95% in the second quarter. Price's guilty conscience over wage inequality led him to embark on an experiment with his company that ended up having unimaginable benefits. His plan was viewed by many as radically socialist and only in favor of equity, but his plan turned out to be very efficient. For almost the entirety of the 3 years, Price's company was operating in economies of scale, or very close to hitting the target spot of constant returns to scale. While this plan worked for Price's company and proved many doubters wrong, many competitors in the industry viewed Price's standard of income equality unachievable. Price's strategy was an extreme version of what many companies have the capability of doing, decreasing the gap between minimum wage workers and CEOs.
Other companies, such as Ben & Jerry's and Whole Foods, have addressed income inequality through less drastic means. When Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield founded their ice cream company, they made an agreement with their employees that the highest paid executive would get paid no more than 5 times the lowest paid employee. Whole Foods started with a maximum pay ratio of 8 to 1 between the highest paid and lowest paid workers. These pay ratios limited inequality in 2 ways, by reducing the large salaries of executives and increasing the wages of all employees to more livable levels. Every year, Ben & Jerry's recalculates the living wage and raises their company minimum wage to match, increasing their employees' economic security. These higher wages bolster the U.S.'s consumer-driven economy, as households have more disposable income to buy goods. These increased wages are also met with an increase in productivity, as seen with gravity payments, leading to an increase in revenue for the companies. Decreased executive pay decreases the company's cost as well, so overall profits increase. Establishing pay ratios also shapes the relationship between the firm, its consumers, and their employees. U.S. consumers believe that CEOs should only make 7 times the lowest paid employee, and so companies that establish it as a goal to keep income inequality in check differentiate their products to consumers. Companies also send a message to their employees when these policies are in place. Employees see that they are valued by the company. This perception is only strengthened when companies continue to support employee rights, such as Ben & Jerry's funding of the Occupy Wall Street protests. However, there are issues that arise because of these maximum pay ratios, the most damaging effect being the loss of executives to other companies. Both Ben & Jerry's and Whole Foods began to increase their pay ratios when they found it difficult to find replacement executives that would accept a comparatively lower salary. These issues are generally resolved through the design of the company's corporate structure, by promoting from within the company rather than constantly looking for outside talent. This creates a workforce that understands the benefits of the system and supports its continuation.
Closing the gap between the wages of the highest and lowest earners in the United States would mean less leakage from the circular flow of income, which would benefit the economy as a whole. The systems implemented by Gravity Payments and Ben & Jerry's turned out to be effective in closing this gap, as well as increasing employees' loyalty and incentives to work hard. If more companies began lowering their pay ratio and/or increasing employee benefits, they could increase the disposable income of those lower down workers and, in turn, aid in the reparation of our country's current problematic income disparity.